Well, hello everyone. You here, show you right here is I talk about you for higher education, and basically that I'm sure most of us can remember whenever we were in the fourth or fifth grade. It was that knowing about that if we were working on our times tables, especially one of those could be it's like for maybe before we even knew I understood and too much about what financial aid was. But this right here we talk about right here is like with me right here, and like anybody that may want to or like run any type of math class or anything like that. But I'm like really that I know I had most complications in math pretty much myself, and thinking about as to where that we've seen from your previous like activities. But on the other hand, that you see right here is that where I have right here is with me right here. And then you see right here is like me and my mom right here, like for tutoring hours. So I know that a lot of times that whenever we spend time with our parents, that we may want to work that from the time sun rises as well as by the time it's comes to midnight. It's like by the year 2018 right here, and then you have right here is the stars, and then you also have right here is to talk about you for $100,000, and as well as use it for thousands and hundreds, and as well as for cents, and as well as for $20 right here for your goal. It's like a talk about say for your goals to work on making the payments like as was you plan ahead. But also right here is a show right here is like a times set table, multiplication table right here, to where that I'm sure most of us who were like any type of regular basic math or some sort is to where that any type of math classes or anything like that. This right here will be calculated by like which says for if you want to call it like for the amount of money that was either borrowed or that for any type of plans. And I guess if you want to call them like what you call any type of payment plan, arrangements through financial aid. And I got this example right here of like the paperwork, but on your hand that this right here would be right here is like a little multiplication table. As you say, it's like a multiplication table type reading right here, like for financial aid. So I know like with anybody that like this right here more like would stand for like family size as well as for calculations right here of like say the amount of money is like that it's borrowed as well as for if it's like members of the family. But anyway, but a lot of the information that they say is like you kept safe and secure, especially. But they would suggest it's like to where to talk to the financial counselor, especially to where that, especially if you're going to be owning a lot of money back, then they would suggest is to where the workout payments. And if we're talking about, I think I mentioned about $100,000, so I guess the highest it goes would be up to about 80,000 right here. So you have right here is for 80,000, and 80,000 basically means it's going to be about 797 or so a month, and okay, it's like for and if they're about the members of 3 or 4 or so in the family or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure how it works, but then if we would actually do our research about it, but on the other hand, you have right here's like a type of mathematical, type of multiplication table right here, and then you see right here is that with this table that I came up with right here, and thinking necessarily to where that the payments would go between 102 to 477 or so a month, and I include this right here is like for every 5 hours is $5. So just to help anybody understand a little bit as to where if you're willing to come up with about 500, if you're willing to come up with about $5 every 5 or so hours or so, maybe every month, if you're able to come up with about maybe 50 to maybe 120 or 115 or so dollars, to be able to work out your repayments. And like I mentioned before, is to where that if we will be sitting right next to our parents, it's like that the mom or anybody that like weren't to where that you actually working out the math, and if you would do calculating of the math, it's like if you give it about 1 year or so, and then thinking necessarily to where hey that I'm like really is it really all that bad or not? But but really that I'm sure any students they would more likely say is to where that they look forward maybe about mainly about getting the job, getting the job at first before having to work out making the student loan repayments. But let's just say that on average is to where that that's what you call the next job. So anybody that may want to where that yeah, that whenever I look at the paperwork here, and a lot of this is a lot about math. So I guess that's just a whole part. It's like a important task about being what you call being grown up. And I know like this right here would be right here with math. And I know I kept thinking about whenever I was about this age right here with my mom and thinking necessarily to her that I had my biggest struggles, especially with multiplication tables, having to memorize your 4 times 4 and 8 times 8 and all those other mathematical type tables. Like for counting as well as subtraction as like for addition, and knowing about how the points are worth. So anybody that may want to, where really can you earn points while you're working out payments, as well as for like what you scheduling to where your next payment is. So this is basically, if you want to call it like a chore. And with this type of chore, though, that if anybody wants as to where would you rather, if anything, would you rather clean the carpets or clean the chimney or dust a lamp, rather than if you would rather try to collect about $45 or $50 or maybe about $25 or so out of a month just to be able to pay back your student loan repayments. So I'm sure most of us can remember having chores around the house, and one of those could be working, doing the dishes, and maybe doing yard work, or if it's anything related to wash the car. The other one could be is to where that yeah, clean the windows, and as well as vacuuming the floors. But this tour right here is basically about working on as to where I guess it's kind of like what you call, I don't know if you kind of call a mess, but if you're talking about over $25,000 worth of student loan repayments that you got to fix and take care of, then more likely I guess it could be kind of like what you call as a mess. One way to clean it up is like to where it's like for how you're able to work out repayments. So think about it's like for the amount of savings, as well as how much you're able to work out for the goals, as well as for the year, and as like for the goals right here. So if we would actually do the multiplication table for 100,000, and then you see right here is that with this table I was able to work out with right here. I had these zeros right here just based on as to where that for like anybody that may want to where that yeah that for some of it, which according to maybe my understanding, is to where, depending on how well you do in school, that you may be forgiving a little bit of it. And some of this stuff could also be related to interest too. So if anybody were to get a packet of a lot of stuff that they may think necessarily to where that yeah that if you want to make it like a little fun activity, and I can tell anybody here that I'm not really thinking about like a game of Monopoly here, to where it's not really like a game of Monopoly, to where that yeah that yeah you may win some money or maybe be paid some money, but then on your hand too, we're not talking about playing money here. We're talking about actual spending money, and like with anybody, they weren't to where that after it says about after 25 years of repayments, of say there's a payment period or so of 25 years. So let's just say that on averages to where that we could be making about on average about this much on on our taxes. So each year when we file our taxes, and I'm sure knowing about like for between mom and son is like your mother and son right here, is that you have right here, is to where each person that makes on equal amount on their taxes especially, and thinking necessarily to where about how much money of that is of course set aside to like which say is like if you want to maybe look at it, it's like a little bit like a deposit, but then on the other way of how to speak is to where it's like I mentioned before, it's a contract, but then negotiation is like for an agreement to where that you're willing to pay up on for what was agreeable. So let's just say on average is to where that I can go ahead and pick right here is like this right here will be 109. 109, that would mean about if you borrowed 25,000 right here, and then the payment would be about 109. But then you made that payment, but then maybe you are agreeing to pay an additional $39. So I know, like with anybody, if they were to work the math right here, and I know, like tell anybody like the mom or anybody else, it's like if it's going to be the anybody any parent, or if it's going to be any cousins or whoever whichever family member that they may warrant, or that that if you're able to work out payments, that thinking of where you're thinking necessarily to where you were not always good at math, but you're like, weren't to her, really? I'm like, that as long as you're able to work out payments, like you're working out payments and scheduling payments, but then on your hand too, that if you exceed after about maybe 65 days, then more likely that could be what you call, I don't know, I could maybe say in the danger zone, because they likely say is to her, if it's been so many days since your last payment, and then they may be letting you, notifying you about that. So that's just a thing that anybody likely warrant, or that financial aid. That with financial aid, maybe not everything is considered what you call as a free gift. I'm like, they may say is to where that there may be some amounts of money that are already paid for, or they're willing to pay for a part of that payment for you. But on your hand too, that they say is to where that if it goes below 10,000, let's just say if it's about up to 5,000, and more likely that about that 5,000 could be forgiven. So just think about it as to where the amount of interest, of course, that's add on to there. So like with anybody, is to where they try to set this plan and this goal right here is to where they schedule payments, and I'm sure like a payment it all adds up to, and I know like with anybody is if they were to be adding up any additional payments and think it is to where that they can use right here is like $25 to most of us. $25 to most of us may equal to nothing. It seems like it's not worth nothing nowadays. But let's just say that if you have right here is the multiplication tables. Try to draw it here. Is the dollar sign right there. But anyway, $25, and then if you multiply that times 175, about 175. 175 months. Use 175 months right here as example. And if anybody wonders as to where 175 months, that seems like a long time. But how much 125 of 175 months, and I'm sure they could probably say is to where work it out to where about part of the billing status would have been taken care of. And the way I think about it, though, is maybe it's not all promise, but I guess I can say is like really I might to try it and then see if it works. But other than that, with my situation, I know it is like really that you're working out payments, especially necessarily thinking about as to where that $25 or so, and thinking necessarily to where $25 times 25 times 25, and thinking that you'll be coming up to close to 100 by now, maybe a little over 100. So really that we may be surprised about how fast we can collect $25 from out of those couple of days, just to be able to work out payments. And so basically that anybody like learn to about every 5 hours or so. So this amount of money could also come from, let's say, salary pay, or maybe if if you were able to work it out to collect the money somehow, it's like for what you work for, your time recorded, anything like that, and be able to work out payments. So anybody that may warrant or that for all this other digital like stuff, I set the goals as well. For $20, and you have right here is from mom and son. The son may not know too much about all this stuff because he may have been too young really to really understand and really remember. But really that on the other hand, that whenever a kid that turns 18, that whenever they get a job and thinking necessarily toward like the W-2 forms, and as well as all those other forms, and thinking necessarily toward that for how the mom's able to look at the paperwork and thinking about it, she gives you, which gives you some good advice as well, and thinking necessarily for like, well, before you know it, that more likely is like really that it's really the amount, and I don't know. I'm like, really, if anybody can answer that question as to where that really are bills made, to put more stress on the mind, like anybody that may warrant to where that that's an awful lot of money right there. That's an awful lot of money. You could buy yourself a car with that amount of money. But I say that you give it 2 or 3 years and see what happens, and I'm sure they could probably say as to where that you may be you may, one of these days for any type of higher education, you may be on that situation to where you could be making about between 10 and 15,000 a year, or up to 25,000 a year, for higher education. So like with anybody that they may warrant, to where that with me though, that whenever I was, in top of school and thinking about a lot of things that I just thought that were just, in my imagination, but if I'm able to get a job that pays pretty well, and I'm sure, like with anybody will likely say, it's like really for what is really considered to be a miracle. But on the other hand, amazing if you want to call it, but they have a talk about it right here. I try to say for mother and son is like you have right here of showing right here is like for higher education for between like and create is like why we ask questions, for secure and parents and task right here. So this right here was me speaking right here, and I can tell anybody here that they seen from other video postings and talking about is to where that you may not have been a teacher at any point, but then on your hand too you can maybe give some advice. I'm like, this advice could be is to where that Roy, that do we think that maybe we can get something somewhere with just something small? And I know that, and it seems like every 45 or maybe every 60 days that something's going to change related to how the systems work and maybe how the financial arrangements work, as well as for the multiplication tables. So I know that ever since I was in the 5th grade, I would need something like a multiplication table, something kind of like this, something that's not really money counting. So anybody that may want to where that 4 times 4 and 4 times 8, all those other digits, and thinking like that you do subtraction especially, but at the time that the way I would usually want to work the math is I want to try to figure out, for what's the highest number I can maybe count out for, is to where that sometimes even on a calculator, this right here will be a small number right here for 25, but then if I would multiply that times 40 and think about like the answer, and like I wonder to where that you may come up with about 1,753. So just think about it as like I have right here is the multiplication table especially. So, but anyway, but working the math right here, like with anybody that they may work to where multiplication tables is like keeping track of the counting as well as for any type of repayments especially. But anyway, but there you have it. Talk about say for the multiplication tables and working the math right here, as well as like for any type time recorded, as well as if it's going to be up to 5,000 or so hours or so of working out payment arrangements. It's like you spend time with your parents, as well as knowing about how well that they know how well you're educated, as for what you learned about for education. So if anybody were warned to where that your parents, of course, maybe not everyone has been able to get what you call this higher education some sort. So thinking until that they were maybe in their 40s or so, or maybe at least maybe 35, or maybe in their 50s or so, but thinking necessarily to where that that any amount of money that they do make, and knowing about you for a higher education, that with me though is to where that thinking about whenever I look at the paperwork and thinking about is to where that whenever you were in the 5th grade, that you probably the only type of paperwork that you really were knowing about was, if anything, maybe was like if they gave you a folder to use. They gave you a folder with maybe 3 or 4 pages or so of homework, for you to study, of the math problems. And I know if most of us have seen those videos from the previous, I try to say for that some examples of my math work. But anyway, but there you have it. I talk about here for like the tutoring out, as well as for how well we know the basic math. And you have it there. It's like a maybe 25 here, and talk about higher education for why we ask, talk about the multiplication tables. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.